Welcome back! I'm Tyler, you're watching Scarfing Scarves, and welcome to the 61st installment of Last Week Lolita News. At the top of the segment, Angelic Pretty's release of Dream Cat Go Round didn't exactly complete the circuit. The series remains almost entirely in stock, and sources are mixed as to whether that is owed to the fact that this looks like their printer ran out of ink midway through the cats, or that there are cats, bats, and crosses on it for no other reason than the sheer likelihood that AP's design process is essentially spin the bottle. Tell me this is a Halloween print all you want, thematically it's about as spooky as a tea doily dipped in sacramental wafers. All that said, the black colorway is actually cute, and this brand can add that as an accomplishment in their history of pasting bright pastel sweet prints to a black skirt for no earthly reason. Speaking of questionable motivations, Angelic Pretty has also released a few photos of upcoming winter prints, one of which is a bona fide Christmas print. And this reporter would be shaking out of her skin in excitement, except this attempted holiday cheer looks like clip art pasted to a shower curtain. I am not remotely happy about the use of polyester for anything that's going to have zero depth, and while there is a good chance I will buy it anyway because I have a near clinical obsession with all things Noel, I will commit the sacrilege of saying that Baby could have done it better. Considering the descriptor of this print roughly translates to lyrical bunny and shy bear turned into snowmen, it would seem I'm not the only one with Baby on the brain. This print is one cameo Usakumya away from being a bad BTSSB cosplay, and I'm willing to forgive all that if only for the tiny reindeer I just noticed moments ago. I take back everything I said. I am now fully willing to hand over a car payment for Rudolph's kawaii cousin, blast credibility, there are tiny antlers. Meanwhile, AP has also released photos of another series the brand is describing as bear print with a fur collar and sash. It actually looks really fracking cute. And while it might look like I'm going back on my issues with shiny fabrics, you should know that my standards are about as immovable as gelatin. This thing reminds me of one of those satin ornaments from when I was 6, and nostalgia is set to win out every time because it distracts me from the neo-capitalist hellscape ruled by a tangerine carnival barker that we currently occupy. That was a whole lot of words that essentially translate to shiny thing distracts me from angry orange, and I'm standing by for pics of the JSK in hopes that they'll release it in a cut that encourages breathing in any aspect. Transitioning towards another brand, Royal Princess Alice's White Fox Amaryllis has come under disputed translation. Some are calling the flower spider lily, some cluster amaryllis, and all agree that those sleeves make it look like a weeby flying squirrel. The room for debate on that one went out the window the moment the designer decided to take flight on a passing breeze. In all seriousness, my inner 14-year-old loves the color palette. The JSK can be yours for only 33k yen, the jacket for 22k, the fox ears for roughly 100 USD, and the head bow for 40 for people who don't want to look like a furry in a wingsuit the very moment they have the ill-advised impulse to leave their house. The series is expected to be shipped out in February of 2020 for those too drunk to be properly dissuaded, and moving on to our final release, this is the most beautiful couch print this reporter has ever seen. Both the OP and skirt can be drawn into a bustle, and there's even a stylish matching hat available so you don't have to go and murder a couch cushion in hopes of completing the look. Jokes aside, there isn't a bad colorway in the bunch. Sadly, reservations ended October 6th, and those who missed it will have to wait for it to come up on the secondhand market to make their dreams of blending in with their grandmother's love seat a reality. She's bound to notice her missing curtains eventually. Classic Lolitas would be wise to avoid further furniture crimes. Meanwhile, as that about wraps up the week, and a certain Facebook community is at it again, we turn towards Last Week Lolita News' next special segment, in which this reporter tries to practice moderation, fails, and launches a lot of you into a rabbit hole you neither needed nor would ever want, commonly known as every installment on this channel ever. Those of you not warned off by that horde of words should know where this is going. And welcome to Drag Queens and Lolita Fashion. It all started in Ruffle Chat, and with a post about a certain cat. A scaredy cat, to be specific, and to summarize what was said, the post noted that RuPaul's Drag Race UK had just begun, said one of the contestants is obviously Lolita inspired, went on to say that they love the idea of a queen inspired by Lolita, and ended by asking what people's opinion was on the use of Lolita fashion in drag and other performance arts. So not exactly your average dinner opener, but certainly not a question that one would predict to raise an entire tea party to the ground. A sentiment that you would be wrong on, because no sooner had the post gone live than we were treated to Scaredy Cat herself, half the community yeeted their eyes out the window in sheer nope, and the people still on board after seeing that god-awful jacket fracked off the moment it was pointed out that the OP they're wearing is a $35 Lolita costume a la Diet Milano found on eBay, hopefully soon to be buried 6 feet deep. which granted, not the most even-handed way to start the installment, but that makeup is going to give me nightmares, and I prefer Mana's lack of schnoz to whatever hot pink runway business is going on with their nose. All she's missing is the guy with the flashing batons, and we can land a whole ass plane on that pastel LAX. Does he run out when she tries to put sunglasses on? That said, to get back on topic, when asked what their opinions were on the use of EGL in drag, the commenters seemed to follow certain themes. Many worried that the combo would further promote misconceptions for Lolita fashion. Equal amounts said we can't police how drag performers express themselves. A tidal wave pressed F on the makeup. Some said the clash in aesthetics meant that drag and EGL just don't mix. And some said they specifically wouldn't want any association with drag due to perceived transphobia. Even more specifically, the transphobia they've witnessed from the head of the drag race himself in the form of RuPaul. And in a turn I wasn't expecting, those same members of the trans community faced unwarranted backlash simply for voicing their experiences with the subject. Which, to ignore the tidal wave of not all drag communities that ensued, given that I haven't seen the show since I was in my teens, I had to look into it. And what I found took me from shrugging at the concept of mixing EGL and drag to delving into the differences in how drag and Lolita fashion handle feminine expression and gender. This is going to be another pseudo-essay no one wanted, and to jump to it before you jump ship, let's start with the basics. For those who don't spend their spare time baking their face to the backtrack of Little Pound Cake, RuPaul's Drag Race is essentially a televised competitive pageant show for drag queens. It began in 2009, remains extremely popular, and while it's not the only representation of the drag community, it is by far the most mainstream public face, which makes it the primary avenue to mainstream success as a drag queen, and the primary focus of my research. Because while there are a plethora of other drag communities, none move and shake drag's public perception quite like Drag Race, which gives this show's messaging a certain level of importance unequaled in smaller communities. Which means when the owner of the show defends the use of a slur that rhymes with canny, things take a very dark turn. A turn that comes when you say things in response to someone apologizing for using that word, like, I love the word and I hate the fact that he's apologized. I wish he would have said F you jerk. He addressed the shock of those taken aback by a cis male defending and even celebrating such a slur by telling people to stop being so easily offended, as if summoning his inner conservative politician, and follows that with the statement that people shouldn't take life so seriously, which would at least stand a snowflake's chance in hell at being a consistent motto if it weren't for the fact that he takes the running of Drag Race very seriously. Or, more to the point, exactly who can run in it. To reference a Guardian article from 2018, when asked if cis women could compete on the show, he said, drag loses its sense of danger and its sense of irony once it's not men doing it, because at its core, it's a social statement and a big FU to male-dominated culture. So for men to do it, it's really punk rock because it's a real rejection of masculinity. Which I won't even begin to get into the bitter irony of not allowing women in a space that's supposed to be a real fuck you to male-dominated culture. We'll swing back to that later because RuPaul wasn't done, and when asked if he would allow post-medically transitioned trans women to compete, he referenced a trans queen once in his show by the name of Peppermint, who hadn't gotten breast implants, and when pressed if he would admit a trans woman who had, he said probably not. He went on to say that, quote, you can identify as a woman and say you're transitioning, but it changes once you start changing your body. It takes on different things. It changes the whole concept of what we're doing. He then stated that Drag Race has had some contestants that have had plastic surgery in the face and butt, and ends with, but they haven't transitioned, which, if you read between the stark, glowing, practically radioactive lines, essentially translates to drag, according to RuPaul, is for cis-bodied male-identified people only to perform hyper-femininity. He views transitioning as a form of cheating, and cis women apparently aren't punk rock enough to be allowed in a space that is supposed to be a, quote, FU to male-dominated culture. On a show that is to remain entirely cis-male facing if RuPaul has anything to say about it. I generally like my irony more subtle than a blaring foghorn, but there you have it. Also, caps on transitioning is like taking performance-enhancing drugs tweet or it didn't happen. Oh wait, there it is, right under things a cis gay man shouldn't say about trans women, because for the love of all things holy, you're supposed to bake your face, not your brain. With all that said, I'd like to point out something he said in the very same article about the nature of drag that I want you to remember. Well, I don't like to call drag wearing women's clothes. If you look around this room, she's wearing a shirt with jeans, that one's wearing jeans and a t-shirt, right? So women don't really dress like us. We are wearing clothes that are hyper-feminine, that represent our culture's synthetic idea of femininity. And this is where his entire argument for excluding excluding cis and trans women from drag spaces falls apart. He outright admits that he doesn't consider drag to be wearing women's clothes, says women don't dress like them, and then goes on to imply that the hyper-feminine category that they're displaying is something wholly other. So, if drag is to be this whole other world completely separate from what men or women wear, if it is to be this thing that says F you to a male-dominated culture, if it is to be, quote, not women's clothes, but something other and apart, then how, pray tell, is it not drag when women do it? How is it not a presentation of hyperfemininity? How is it not dangerous and different? And how and where do you get off on saying that when women do it, it's not punk rock? Which brings us back to the topic at hand, how drag and Lolita fashion handle feminine expression and gender. I would say, after what we've learned today, it's safe to say that the two don't mix. At least when it comes to RuPaul's Drag Race as he sees it. Because if Drag Race is a gated community whose founder thinks you need 0 tits and a dick to participate, Lolita fashion welcomes everyone. Every gender, every body type, every person, cis or trans, at whatever part they are in their journey on this planet, Lolita fashion's expression of hyperfemininity welcomes you with open arms. The utter horseshit of RuPaul claiming the concept of hyperfemininity is something that women don't participate in is baldly wrong the very moment you take a look at Lolita fashion. It is disturbing in its absolute blindness to femme community's contributions within the world of drag and Lolita across the board. And it is unacceptable in its ignorance to the experience of trans women in drag spaces who have seen their lives used as punchlines. Drag is not just for boys. Lolita is not just for girls. And to think in such binary terms for who can or cannot participate in drag, the founder of the most popular drag show in the world not only lets down the bevy of talented individuals in the LGBT community just waiting to show their stuff to the grandfather of gender fucks, he participates in and promotes the same male-dominated culture he claims to be against. So yes, while RuPaul's Drag Race is not the be-all end-all of drag, and I'm sure your drag community that meets in the basement of a Motel 6 is super inclusive of everyone and has no problems, so long as the face of drag continues to be a boys' club with no girls allowed, with a history of using trans experiences and slurs for a punchline, no, I don't think Lolita fashion could ever be properly represented on the show. Not so long as Lolita's message of celebrated rebellious femininity meant to be shared by anyone is scuttled by demands that your gender and body match a certain mold. I challenge one goddamn queen to contest the punk rock nature of being a Lolita in public. And that's all the time we have for tonight. This has been Tyler, you've been watching Scarfing Scarves, and before you run off to wonder why a pastel princess went off on a bunch of queens, you should know that you can catch me at KCON October 19th through 20th, YomaCon October 31st through November 3rd, and OniCon November 8th through 10th in Galveston, Texas. You should also know that the work on this show is partially sponsored by BB&B. They continue to astound me with their gorgeous deco jewelry, and you can find their brilliant works at bbnb.net. Link to their shop below, and to wrap things up with a big fracking bow, I'd like to thank my patrons for being the reason I can deep dive into the pit of no return on topics like these. You guys are the real dream team behind this drivel. And should you like to see videos before the public, or watch me go through every phase of psychosis on a Tuesday afternoon, you can head over to patreon.com/lastweeklolitanews for more content that is best viewed under the influence of single malt whiskey. I'll not take responsibility for what you'll find there. Thanks again, guys, and I'll catch you next time.